So, hi Luke.
Hey Nicky, how are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you.
Hi Nicky.
Hi, are you okay?
We're okay. Yes, we're okay.
Good. So we're good. So this is the end of what's been a very, very interesting day listening to all our speakers. So stay with us because this is going to be a really good session led by our colleagues. So just say a bit before we introduce our team here is about salary finance. So salary finance have been with HPMA for quite some time, and we've worked with them mainly as sponsors, being at when face-to-face at events and things like that. So it's been a real privilege to work with you. So it's the largest employee financial wellbeing provider in the UK. Across country, over 4 million employees who can access your services, made possible by their 600 plus employer partners, over 75 of which are in the NHS community. They are committed to providing products that always put the needs of people using them first. Their award-winning financial wellbeing platform includes financial education, payroll savings, affordable borrowing, salary advances, and personalised group protection. So they have a broad range of services. They've just been recognised in Deloitte's Technology Fast 50, showing them to be one of the most innovative companies in the UK. And since 2015 have combined their passion for social purpose with the best in fintech, is that how you say that, in employee wellbeing. They partner with some of the largest and most complex organisations in the UK, including many of us who are represented at our conference here today and tomorrow. Their job is to take the hassle out of launching a new benefit away from you in the organisation into their hands to make it happen as smoothly as possible. Who wouldn't want a piece of that, let's be honest. But they also develop ongoing relationships with all partners that they work with to make sure that the offers are still relevant. So they are very much involved in understanding our service, the sort of difficulties that we faced. And in wellbeing, it's not just about emotional health and wellbeing, but financial wellbeing has really been quite stark, particularly during COVID, in relation to the number of our staff who have accessed food banks, for example, people that have been on furlough, other things like that. So it is something that really affects us all day to day. So today we are joined by some of the team from Salary Finance, not all of them. So it's a real pleasure to welcome Zarina, who is the head of content. I'll allow you to introduce yourself in a minute. And then Luke Millard. We've also got some videos throughout this as well from other key people that are involved in this process. Hopefully I've done you justice there and not gone on too long. But over to you, Zarina, to introduce yourself, and then to Luke.
Thanks, Nicky. Definitely did us justice. Thank you. So hi, everybody. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. So we're kind of hoping to create a bit of a discussion today on inclusive financial wellbeing and how to kind of create one for your people. As Nicky was saying, my name is Zarina and I head up content and research at Salary Finance. So in my day job, I spend a huge amount of time doing research to kind of understand the financial wellbeing landscape in the UK today. And I'm probably going to give you quite a few stats and facts, but going to try and not bore you to death with them. But I just want to take a bit of time before I do that to understand why we've kind of come together today. We've come together to talk about that little thing we know called money. It's a thing that allows us to eat, to stay warm, to put a roof over our heads, to provide and care for our loved ones, and to maybe, if we're lucky, pursue some of our interests, hobbies, and dreams. However, the reality is that many of us feel we're just not in control of our money. Perhaps we're in debt and we feel we just can't get out of it, or we're running out of money each month and we have little or no savings. Perhaps we're actually supporting some of our loved ones financially. So not feeling in control of our money is actually a really, really common issue. In our latest research at Salary Finance, we found that 26% of people are actually worrying about money on an ongoing basis. What was perhaps more surprising for us in this research, and we did this during the pandemic, and we thought that people would be worrying more about their health than maybe money, but actually money worries top the list. So this is even more important to people than their career, their health, and their relationships. I think it's little surprise that if you're stressed and anxious about money, it's going to have an impact into all areas of your life. Perhaps how you physically feel, how much sleep you might be getting, how you feel about yourself, your relationships with your loved ones, how much work you can get done. So it has the kind of potential to impact and infiltrate all these different areas of our lives. During the pandemic, we found there are sort of big differences between those that have high financial well-being and those with poor financial well-being. The former are 2.6 times more likely to be saving than the latter. We also found that actually how much someone earns, where they live, the kind of industry they work in makes generally very little difference to their overall financial well-being. So although these kind of demographics have very little to do with, sort of financial well-being, age, job titles, income, location, there were two exceptions to this rule, and those two exceptions were gender and race. What was kind of more surprising or alarming, I guess, was when we kind of put those together. So 46% of Black women suffer from money worries compared to 18% of white men. And there are many factors that influence this, and we're not going to kind of solve all of those today or get into all of those. But I think the point I want to make today really is that I think many employers are now really starting to think about financial well-being in a really big way, which I think is brilliant. But I would want to reiterate that I think it's important that they're considered alongside any kind of diversity and inclusion agendas in your organization. They sort of need to be addressed together. We also found in our research that those with poor financial well-being are much more likely to be providing financial assistance to their loved ones than those with high financial well-being. I don't know what we all make of that, but I think that's not a great thing. And this is despite 24% of those people having to borrow money themselves in order to support their loved ones. I think that's just really shocking and says a lot about the society that we're living in today. So there are kind of 4 key areas that in this report, which we will send to everyone, that I've kind of highlighted that I think are important for people to consider, employers to consider. The first is the ability to provide access to financial education. So this means access to meaningful, free to access financial education for your employees, encouraging better habits, answering questions, and keeping employees up to date on issues that affect them. I also highlight the fact that I think it's important to make salaries go further. And what I mean by this is offering, the ability to potentially offer a low-cost credit product, schemes to help with everyday outgoings or access to debt support, and generally providing employee financial benefits that can ease the stress of managing money. I think it's also very important to encourage saving. So developing a savings habit that increases an employee's resilience and their focus on the future. People who struggle to save may find that a salary-linked savings scheme can help. And the fourth thing, and this is perhaps the most important thing for me, and maybe the hardest to get right, but is opening the conversation. We're going to talk about this a little more later, but creating a healthy culture when it comes to talking about money and using these communications to build awareness of support and understanding to break down those kind of money taboos. So that's kind of my overall introduction to financial wellbeing. We're gonna go into some of these details in a bit more depth, but Luke, I don't know whether you wanted to colour some of this with what you found in the NHS specifically over the last year.
Yeah, hi everyone. So my role at Salary Finance, and actually before I start, this is the second webinar I've done this week where Jason Butler has taken my billing. So it's fantastic to be here. My role at Salary Finance is I'm one of the leads that's actually working directly with our NHS partners and hopefully future clients. So I'm having the conversations in the marketplace, if you like, and I'm one of the people that would help people on board with Salary Finance and realize their financial well-being strategy goals. I suppose everything that I do, I will put an NHS lens, on things. So, absolutely all the stats and stuff is very important. But certainly for me, I think the takeaways from today should be more about the the emotional and the individual people impacts that we can really realize by helping people financially. But that said, there's so much information out there, including across NHS workforce, that it's hard not to reference some of these things. So I suppose if I just give you some context about NHS finances, and by that I mean the workforce, I think it's underappreciated that 71% of the workforce have below prime credit scores. So that means, when they're going out to borrow money or access a mortgage or a product, that they're kind of starting disadvantaged, and that's the highest sector of any in the UK. So much more likely to have to pay more and less likely to be accepted, in the first place. We see that particularly kind of band 5 and below, the NHS nurses will have, around a third will have 5 or more high cost credit products already in place. NHS employees are the number 1 users, of loan price comparison sites as well. So, and I think that link between financial and mental well-being, is very much well established now. But financial stress is definitely a contributing factor to stress-related absences, and certainly talking to our friends in the NHS this last year and two, managing record rates of absence is a huge thing, and that's really impacting how you're able to continue to respond to the challenges of a tough winter and the pandemic ongoing, etc. So I think anything that we can do in this arena to try and remove one of those, stresses where possible, can only be a positive thing. And certainly off the back of last month's futures report into HR and OD, I think, I recognise we're not necessarily one of the big ticket items. We're not, re-establishing professional standards or anything like that. But I do think by addressing financial well-being, we can get a relatively quick win. That punches well above its weight. So I've got absolutely loads I can talk about, when it comes to this, and I would love to have more conversations, with anyone that's willing. If you want to talk more specifically about those areas in the report that we can help with around, part of the vision, for example, the employee health and well-being focus, the attraction, the retention, the really interesting thing for me is ICS is becoming anchor institutions, things like that. And we're having a number, I should say. We'd like to have more, a number of good conversations now with sort of NHS England regional leads, with ICS wellbeing leads. Looking and trying to take that one workforce approach, which is referenced in that report as well. So. So for me and for who I am, I'm probably the person that, if anyone this session wants to find out more, should probably talk to, and I can steer you in the right direction.
Thanks, Luke.
Thank you. Thanks, Luke. I just wanted to sort of pick up a little bit on some of the things that Luke was saying there about the mental and the link between mental and financial well-being. I've got a few more stats that I want to share. So I didn't mention them in the introduction because I think the link between mental and financial well-being is such an important part of the conversation, and I wanted to pull some of this out and touch on it a little bit more. So in our latest research, we found that actually those with poor financial well-being are 5.3 times more likely to be feeling depressed and actually finding it difficult to carry on with daily life, and 3.7 times more likely to be suffering from anxiety and prone to panic attacks. I think the thing is about all of these stats is that actually organisations have achieved so much over the last few years when it comes to mental health in the workplace. I think what's become quite evident, though, is that some of the kind of traditional concerns that people thought could just be mental health in isolation, actually now we can see do have their origins in financial well-being. And I think many employers are now really trying to prioritise their employees' financial well-being. We're speaking to so many, and I think that the organisations that I think sometimes have been able to do this effectively are not sometimes viewing financial wellbeing as a whole new strategy in isolation from mental wellbeing. They're actually doing it and thinking, okay, how can we kind of complement our existing wellbeing programs? And, you know, we hear so much about holistic wellbeing and all of this kind of stuff, but I think actually fundamentally what it means is about creating a richer employee experience that is actually much simpler, much more cost effective, and kind of easier generally to get going. So we're now going to play one of our videos. So this is from Alison Bolson, who is Director of Workforce at Wrightington, Wigan and Lee NHS Trust. So in this video, Alison explains why they kind of got into their kind of financial wellbeing journey and how it was linked to kind of the mental wellbeing of their people. So we're going to play that for you now.
Thanks, Zarina.
So I'm Alison Bolson. I'm the Director of Workforce here at Wrightington, Wigan and Lee NHS Trust. I think we tried to use salary finance as the opportunity to get in to talk openly about financial health being part of mental wellbeing. If you don't know how you're going to pay your bills, and if you've got mounting debts that you can't pay, that is going to have such an impact on not only you as an individual in your outside of working life, but on work as well. So we've got a duty of care to our employees to really look after them in work. And as I've said, part of the programme for us around mental health is around looking after people's financial well-being. The partnership that we have with Salary Finance really provides the opportunity for everybody to gain some support. So whether that be people applying for their loans through Salary Finance, or whether it be Salary Finance actually supporting them in budget control, in financial management techniques, or accessing other or signposting to other services, it's been really important that Salary Finance have been able to do that for us. Implementation was really easy, to be honest. It was very much a partnership approach between Salary Finance and the Trust. You know, it's just unbelievable really to think that you can have such a programme that offers such life-changing support for staff. So for any trust that was thinking of launching a financial wellbeing programme, I couldn't do anything more than recommend Salary Finance.
So I thought it would also be useful, that was obviously Alison, who's the employer, but I thought it would also be useful to share an employee who has first-hand experience of having poor financial well-being. So we're now going to hear from Amy, who works at Wrightington, Wigan and Lee NHS Trust, because I think her journey from kind of going from having quite poor financial well-being to becoming financially healthy is really inspiring. So
Thanks.
My name's Amy. I work for Wrightington, Wigan and Lee NHS Foundation Trust. I work in the community for the hospital at home team. The salary finance scheme sort of saved me from a high interest bank loan. For the same loan for 2 years, it was £800 cheaper. So I took it. I applied on Sunday night, and then Monday morning I got my reply to say I'd been accepted. And then about 3 hours later, the money was in my bank. Since they've started the salary finance scheme, I think it has helped a lot of people. Within our team, people have had a lot of, I'd say, bad luck, unexpected payouts, big payouts, and they've had to pay with credit cards and the very high interest. And there was a lot of worries around how they're going to pay it back. And now they've paid that, and they've just got a lower interest rate. They're just able to get on with the day-to-day life without that added stress. You feel like you can give 110% to your patients, knowing that added stress has just vanished. I'm a lot better with my money now. I do have a savings account, just in case I need that extra money, because before I didn't have a savings account. The amount that I'm paying now is budgeted. So it comes out of my wages and I don't need to worry about it. But once I come to the end of the payments, then I'll just start putting that straight into the savings because I'm not missing it.
So we were hoping to have our head of financial education, Jason Butler, here today, but it's actually his anniversary, so he's taking his wife out for dinner, so he can't make it today. But I asked Jason to record a video for us today. Jason is one of the UK's leading money experts. He's spent years directly working with people who have poor financial well-being. What I think is particularly interesting about Jason is that he has first-hand experience of what it's like to have really poor financial well-being. He used to be in huge amounts of debt and managed to get himself out of it. So I thought it would be really interesting for him to speak to you directly today. So we're going to play his video that he made for us directly now.
And I'm the head of financial education here at Salary Finance. Now, in my financial services career, I have interviewed well over 1,000 people about their money, and I've had countless conversations with people who've had some quite significant money problems. But I also know what it's like to be up against it financially, because I grew up in a very poor family in a small 2-up, 2-down house in southeast London, and I got myself into a right financial pickle in my early 20s when I ended up in lots of debt, non-mortgage debt. So I know what it's like to have money problems, money worries, money troubles. And that's what motivates me to help people avoid making the same mistakes I made, and more importantly, deal with any issues that they've had in the past so that they can actually live their very best life. Now, as we saw from Amy's testimonial, when you've got money worries, that affects your work. But when you can deal with your money and you can deal with the problems you have and feel like you're making progress, that gives you a sense of optimism and hope, and it makes you actually, deliver better when you are at work. So this isn't something we can avoid, and this is what we try and embrace here at Salary Finance, and the work that we do with employers is we are really wanting to get the taboo of talking about money and managing money out in the open and give people both the knowledge and the tools so that they can make progress with their finances. Now, the fact is that humans are not wired naturally to make good financial decisions, and that's because we're always balancing our immediate needs, desires and wants with what's in our long-term best interests. And that is something which we have to work at in a society where it's so easy to spend money and a lot harder to save it. And if you can't control your spending or understand where your money's going or tell it where you want it to go, that invariably can lead people to fall into debt. And that's because they're spending more than they have coming in for whatever reason. And once you're in debt, it can be very hard to get out of debt. And that can lead to feelings, very powerful emotional feelings of guilt, shame, even anger and fear. And when you're in that situation, it's really easy to put your head in the sand and be in denial and not do anything about it, so that it just gets worse and worse. And as we saw from Amy's testimonial, when you're feeling bad about yourself, when you're feeling bad about your finances, that can really, really affect your ability to do your job. Now, particularly with today's high cost of living and inflation, if you compound that with other financial problems and perhaps people's income hasn't grown as much as it has in the past, that can make people feel that the odds are stacked against them and that they're overwhelmed and that they can't really move the dial. Well, that's not the case, and we at Salary Finance are all about teaching hope, optimism and faith in the future and helping people to help themselves. Now, the foundation of the work that we do teaching people how to be better with money is teaching them a framework called the 8 money milestones. And an essential part of the money milestones is to get free of all non-mortgage debt as quickly as is feasibly possible. And that's where the salary link comes in with salary linked loans. Because when you borrow money that is deducted from your salary, it makes it almost impossible for you to default and miss a payment. And therefore you preserve and hopefully improve over time your credit rating and your ability to get lower cost credit. And because the risk of loan default is very low by virtue of the salary link, and there's very minimal marketing costs for distributing these loans, it means that that can be passed on to your employees by a lower interest rate, which means either a lower monthly repayment, alleviating pressure on your employees, or they can accelerate their debt repayment journey quicker than would be the case with other higher cost credit. And the other aspect of having access to salary linked loans is that it enables people to either deal with their historic debt issues quicker than they would have done otherwise, or to be able to cope with unexpected expenses for which they haven't currently got savings for, and avoids them slipping into expensive other forms of credit. So we have to meet people where they are now. We have to help teach them the skills that they need to make the right money decisions, but more importantly, you need to give them access to the right competitive products to help make those skills a reality. So what we do at Salary Finance is we combine teaching people the money skills that they need to make smart money decisions, but providing them with the very competitive and easy to use financial products that are necessary for them to make progress with their money.
So I hope Jason kind of helped to sort of answer any questions about about salary linked products. But one of the things I really want to touch on is the money taboo. We have talked about this a little bit, we've alluded to it, but I want to just kind of give you a few more stats now. In our latest research, I was quite shocked. I knew that that people didn't like talking about money, but it's actually 81% of us who don't like talking about money to anyone. This is our friends, our family, and definitely not our employer. We're far more likely to talk to our employer if we have a physical health problem or a mental health problem rather than a financial one. And when I looked over the data earlier this year, what I thought was interesting about this was that physical well-being, people are actually fairly comfortable talking to their employer, might be expected. Mental health, still not great. People aren't that comfortable. Financial well-being, just no one wants to talk about it. And what it made me think was that actually so much work has gone into breaking down the kind of mental health stigma over the last 10 years. People still aren't that comfortable with it. And it just goes to show the amount of work that needs to be done. But it made me think, gosh, if that work hadn't been done, we probably wouldn't even be there with mental well-being. So we've got a long way to go with financial well-being and breaking down that money taboo. We're now going to hear a video, and this I think is the most powerful video we've seen today. And this is from Nadia Khan, who is HR lead from the Northern Care Alliance, on her experience of the stigma about talking about financial stress within the NHS.
Financial stress does affect our employees, and financial issues are areas that a lot of employees don't talk about. One of the examples I recall is where we had an individual who had an excellent record, and then over a period of time he was turning up to work late. He was given informal warnings and eventually he got a warning for it. And then there was a number of things that happened. He continued to be late, and then he had an outburst on the clinic, one of his clinics, and that resulted in him being dismissed. And when I got involved, it was an appeal against his dismissal, and that was the first time he actually told us that the reason he was turning up too late was because his partner had lost a job, and he was trying to save as much money as he could. He couldn't buy a peak ticket to get to work on time, so he was taking off-peak tickets to get to work, and that's why he was late. And the day he'd had that outburst at work was because they were going to get evicted from his home with his children. And up until then, he had never spoken about his financial worries to anyone. So it shows it happens, but people don't talk about it, because right up until his appeal day, he hadn't mentioned anything about it at all.
So I think that story is pretty powerful and actually just goes to show how little we can sometimes know about the people we work with and the people we see every single day, and the hidden lives of our colleagues. I have written a guide on how to remove the taboo around money in the workplace, which we will send out to everyone. There's a kind of, I list like 10 top tips, which everyone can kind of get going with straight away. But I thought, we want to leave some time for some questions and discussion. I think potentially we do have some questions, and I thought it would be a good opportunity to kind of get going with that rather than just speaking at everyone. Thanks,
Zarina. I mean, you love your stats, don't you? That's clear to see.
Yeah, I mean, that is my role. So it's a lot of research, and I'm pretty passionate about it. So I think it is. I've learned, my background was in mental health in the workplace. So I spent a lot of years doing a lot of campaign work for mental wellbeing, and it's been really interesting working for Salary Finance and understanding financial wellbeing more over the last few years. So
yeah, I think what's really powerful as a takeaway for me, and it's something Alison said in her video and what we heard in the last section, is about opening up that conversation, because somebody who personally suffers with some mental health, I've been trying to campaign around the stigma around that. But at the same time, it's how do you open up those conversations, which is clearly what Alison is trying to do in her organisation. So it's not seen as taboo, and actually it's a supportive part of the package of wellbeing. So that's really powerful. So so far we've got one question, which is from Tracy, who's asking, where would you recommend to start the journey with this feature as an important part of staff support?
Luke, do you want to answer?
Go on, Luke.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd also just like to address, behind each one of those stats, of course, is the, it is a personal story. So in terms of starting the journey, well, I think just start it. Do you know what I mean? Is often, the hardest thing to do. So certainly you need to perhaps educate yourself about what is available. This is such a I suppose hot topic at the moment. So what we actually saw with those videos, I mean, those videos were sort of recorded pre-pandemic, but the stories are, even more pertinent and relevant now. We can often get maybe a bit too specific or hung up or talk maybe a lot about, the importance of certain things like, affordable credit, because we know just what an important intervention there is. But this whole idea of financial well-being is, quite a broad subject. So there are organizations and providers in the marketplace like Salary Finance, and we're a great place to start in terms of opening a conversation. But then there is loads of information out there. Money and Pension Service, which is the government's arm's length body responsible for a whole national strategy around this. They've got a great set of resources. If you just looked up Money Helper or Money and Pension Service, that's a great place to start. We work closely with the likes of Step Change and other partners. There's educational resources that are available now. But certainly one of the things that you can be doing is talking to your workforce. One thing that we've kind of campaigned for in the past is to try and get more relevant wellbeing questions into the NHS staff survey, for example. We think that's been an area that's been lacking. So perhaps, if there's pulse surveys that you can run internally, to get a snapshot of things. We are currently working on, having lots of conversations across many organisations in the NHS. So sort of watch this space. I do think with the the change of structures, the whole notion and sort of marching forward with integrated care systems, has really brought the topic of workforce health and well-being across multiple providers into the into the topic, into discussion at the moment. So really, I would say there is lots of resources out there. There's loads of research out there, but I personally feel we're almost at a point now where we've kind of tipped over from the what it is into the why and the how we can help. So but I totally appreciate that, where your one person's level of understanding can be completely different to another. So perhaps it's easiest, if you really have no idea where to start, would be to reach out to Nicky or myself or whomever, and I can certainly point you in the right direction with a few resources.
Thanks, Luke. Zarina, did you want to add something?
Yeah, just add a couple of things from what Luke said. I think for me, the foundation is always speaking to employees. I think that is the absolute, and I think it's not, so I think part of the thing is that, the way that we've constructed kind of speaking to employees and listening to them tends to be through kind of a survey that goes out and things like that. And I think those are really useful, but I also think conversations on the ground and kind of actually just going and speaking to people, and they don't necessarily need to be formalized. Formalized can really help with business cases and things like that as well, but actually just having conversations with people can really, really help to understand. And one thing I would say when it comes to financial well-being, I think there's sort of, when it comes to kind of getting going, I think there's two kind of main areas to look at. One is to do with benefits, and I think financial wellbeing benefits are really important because whether it's Salary Finance or someone else, benefits are the thing that encourage action. Like, they're the things that actually are going to allow people to change their lives. The other thing that really needs to be looked at in line with that is culture change. And culture change is really about changing the conversations and getting people to open up. And if you can kind of work on a strategy that allows you to have, looking at your culture and your benefits, those two things combined, I think, can really help. But I think ongoing conversations are really important, so that it's not just a kind of one-off survey. It's actually, an ongoing conversation and a dialogue between you and your employees to find out how they're doing. And that's really difficult when we're so kind of dispersed and there's so many different people with so many different needs. It can be really difficult, but I think having an understanding and that baseline is really important. So.
Thanks, Zarina. So, Luke, you mentioned the staff survey, and one of the comments and concerns that we get back from staff is around confidentiality. So how do you maintain through this relationship, how do you maintain employee confidentiality so that nobody's knowing their business?
Yeah, and that's really why it's really important where you can to to engage with a partner. So, for example, with Salary Finance, and I can only speak about Salary Finance on this particular point, is the relationship is direct between us and the employee. Mm-hmm. So the obligation, if you like, on an employer is purely to action instructions that we may give. So you may see a payroll deduction, for example, and the deduction book would purely just be a payroll ID number or like an ESR record number and an amount. Okay, and that's it. There's no sharing of anything that would allow anyone to work out, if how much somebody's borrowed over how long or anything like that. It's very much the actual minimal data possible would ever be shared. The contract is direct with the employee. The application process is direct with the employee between them and Salary Finance. The risk or the decisioning process is entirely between us and them. It's no different really than if the employee went out to a bank. Okay, it would have nothing to do with you, the employer, and the situation is the same here. But because we have a technology link with the employer, we're just able to be so much more flexible in terms of who and how we work with those employees. Just open up products that just aren't available to them, via banks or mainstream lenders, for example. But absolutely, it's completely confidential, and the employer is not involved in any of it beyond, the most basic things.
Okay, I suppose as an employer, you're very guarded against recommending products, if you like, pensions advice. You're told not to do that. So how do you get over that with the employer in terms of their potential nervousness around promoting Salary Finance as a solution?
Yeah, absolutely.
Luke.
Do you want me to say that one?
You take the hard ones,
Zarina.
Luke. Zarina will take the easy ones.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry. Sorry, my laptop's just going a little slow there. Yeah, so absolutely. So again, it's really important that we have this separation. So when you work with Salary Finance, you're absolutely not involved in any of that side of things, and you're certainly not promoting lending. What you are doing is recognizing that, specifically on the topic of lending, is it doesn't need promoting, right? 1 in 4 of your workforce is going out and taking out a loan every year anyway. Do you know what I mean? What you're doing is simply offering, and we believe it's really important to have a holistic approach. Okay, so it's not just we just don't separate out affordable credit from financial well-being. Everything we do is about financial well-being, and we're simply providing a platform where people can go and self-serve. Okay, and then we're also investing in making sure that people can find us where they're already going, and see that we are the best solution against all the other providers that are out there. So we're getting ourselves onto the price comparison sites, for example. So it's all about total transparency. We want people to just make as many informed decisions as possible and use the employer. You know, we would be communicating or providing communications, you know, in your tone of voice, working with you on, you know, what's right. Certainly never promoting borrowing, and usually the employer would never be promoting salary finance as the provider. But what you would be doing is making people aware of this is a financial wellbeing benefit. It has these constituent parts, you know, and all the information is there for you. But yeah, you have to be separated completely in the process.
That's helpful, Luke. Thank you. So we've got a comment in the Q&A, more of a comment than a question, but it's around. So Victoria from Bath, they're looking to able to issue food bank vouchers as there is a need, and the links between physical and mental health, as you've described, is such an important issue. And what she's saying, we must try in every way possible. So I suppose that a question from that is, what else can organisations do to support financial well-being in the broader sense? Food bank vouchers is a really good idea. Are there any other examples you've got from who you've worked with?
So what? Sorry, Zarina.
Let Zarina go first then.
Yeah, sorry.
Well, I think a big one often is also to do with housing. So I think there's lots of organisations out there that can help with housing costs. And I think this is where I think it is important to speak to employees about their financial well-being and find out the different areas they are struggling with. I mean, for me, food banks, really, really great. Absolutely shocking that, you know, and awful that people are still having to use them that are, you know, are working full time. But yeah, might be necessary. And actually, I think again, working out what, you know, the thing is that depending on who you are and your particular situation at a given time, you're going to need and want different things. And so when we talk about financial well-being, actually, I think, and financial well-being benefits, it could be that you're offering a number of different kind of areas within that to serve your different employees and their different needs at different times. So,
Luke, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I was going to say it's something really striking that I learned recently from our friends at Step Change is over half of the people that go to Step Change for help, okay, are in work. And before they've gone to Step Change, they've waited around 12 months on average before they've approached Step Change, I should say. So there's a real, I suppose, window there where, you know, people in work could have potentially taken action if they'd known about something. So I think that just shows there is a real opportunity for all employers to be, you know, communicating about these things, providing resources. Of course, direct help, action, hardship loans, things like that are all fantastic. But actually, there's this real window of opportunity where people, before they get to the point where they have to go to Step Change, you know, could have taken meaningful action for themselves as well. And certainly one thing that we should be doing, you know, alongside, you know, anything to do with affordable credit would be, you know, really promoting ways of saving, even just tiny amounts, you know, because it's really striking. That's just a very small, I say very small, but, you know, certainly not a large amount of money saved up. We're talking about, you know, £1,000 really does halve the chance of getting into problem debt for anybody. And usually if somebody's going to a food bank and they're in work, there'll be a root cause issue as to why they're not making ends meet. Okay. And it's not always to do with debt, but a lot of the time it will be. But if anything that we can do to help people just start saving really small amounts to build up a fund, that's really where financial resilience comes from. And when you think over half of us don't have £500 saved, you know, we've got a long way to go just to get people to a, you know, quite a small level of savings, and then you'll see them avoiding problems and avoiding, you know, debt, which then has the knock-on impact that, you know, obviously we want to try and help people avoid in the future.
Yeah, sorry, go on, Zarina.
Yeah, I just add to that I think people often think that people who have poor financial well-being, that it is a sort of a lack of knowledge or a lack of understanding about finances. And I think actually, again, through the research we've done, we've seen that actually the majority of people who, the majority of people understand the importance of savings. It's not that people don't understand that actually savings are good, that, you know, being in debt is generally not good. So I think is about habits and the habits that we create over periods of time. And as Jason was saying, actually it can be really, really difficult once you're in that situation if you don't have external help to be able to get out of that. And I think that, you know, as he was also saying, we live in a society now that encourages us to keep spending constantly. And, you know, I think that is the world that we've created. And I speak to so many employers, and I think it's a difficult thing where, you know, where does responsibility lie for this? You know, traditionally speaking, this would have lied with governments and sort of bigger, you know, nowadays we have to understand that actually we're living in a world where there is a responsibility and a collaboration with employees and the employer. And I think that's the world we're moving towards, that the sole responsibility for someone's financial well-being doesn't lie with the employer at all, but it is about having that kind of collaboration with your workforce. So, you know.
I mean, sometimes life events causes some of the issues behind people getting into debt, don't they, in terms of divorces, et cetera, et cetera. So you should never assume about somebody's education around finance and why they've got to where they've got to.
Absolutely.
And I suppose entering this season of goodwill and presents and all that, it's probably a time of year when people do get into debt. So it's something to be mindful for. So just there's one more question in the chat around, would you suggest staff side colleagues have a role too? Because often members will go directly to them. So if you share your experience on that. Zarina first.
Yeah, I mean, so just on this, I think that one of the most powerful things in any organisation is having people kind of, where I've worked, and I've worked with a number of organisations where they have you know, kind of financial wellbeing first aiders and things like this, and in the same way that we have mental wellbeing first aiders. You know, I think there's been a bit of controversy over the last few years around mental wellbeing first aiders and whether they work, and the same thing. But I think whether it's a formalized approach, I think having people who can be the go-to people or person within an organisation it's super important. And again, it's just encouraging that conversation. I've seen it really work in a number of organizations, and you know, with it sitting out sometimes outside of an HR department can be quite useful, you know, and having sort of meetups and groups where people can collaborate, I really think it can be effective and can pass on helpful information. Definitely.
Can I just add, this is a brilliant question, by the way. And I would, no, the staff side, you know, in NHS is so important, and I would urge, you know, HR and OD colleagues on this call, you know, when you're exploring financial wellbeing or engaging on financial wellbeing, you know, bring your staff side reps into the conversation early, involve them from the outset, make sure they understand the goals and the objectives. So I've certainly had experience where there might have been suspicion, for example. They want to understand and need to understand that this is not a money saving or a profit making scheme. It's, you know, for trust. It's not about saving NI. It's not, you know, there's no commercial link. All these things, you know, that they may be suspicious of. You know, obviously they've got staff's best interests at heart. So I think bringing them in, having them understand the issues, which they will know, you know, they probably have more anecdotal evidence than most in terms of the issues that are facing colleagues. So yeah, bring them in early, involve them in the conversations, make sure you've got their buy-in in the same way, you know, as you would from finance or anywhere else.
That's really good advice, Luke. Thank you. So one final question for me, which builds on that. So we talked about confidentiality. How do employers know what they're doing around this space in terms of financial well-being is working? How would they know what they've introduced is having an impact, a positive impact?
Yeah, so I'd say
Luke and then Zarina.
Yeah, I suppose it's quite a difficult practical question to answer sometimes. So certainly if you were to work with someone like Salary Finance, we will play back to you the impact that we're having. So, you know, if people are using a certain product, what they say they're using it for, what savings, you know, they may have made from taking that product, what savings they may be putting into savings accounts, you know, what usage you may be getting out of other products like earnings on demand or whatever it might be. So there's some kind of direct evidence, you know, that you can expect to get from a provider. But then you might also look for, you know, before and after effects of rolling out any employee benefit. You know, there was certainly a lot of talk about earnings on demand or advanced payment solutions being a really useful tool for increasing bank shifts and things like that. So, you know, that's just one example, but you might be able to do some analysis before and after for that kind of thing to see what the impact is, maybe on an organizational level for a trust or a body. But certainly look for, you know, any benefit provider, you know, ask them what MI they can play back to you, you know, which would be really useful in you being able to play back internally, of course, what the impact is. But then there's also going to be huge, wider, I suppose, macroeconomic benefits that at a policy level people are looking for as well. So we're talking about, you know, it's referenced in last month's report, anchor institutions, place-based benefits, you know, what we can do to elevate things in a community. You know, if it goes so deep, you know, our finances impact everything, you know, the quality of our housing, the food that we eat, and all this plays into, you know, the wider you know, health and impact on society on an individual, regional and macro level. That, you know, I and salary finance maybe won't measure, but we can certainly be a very small part of, whilst others look to measure those impacts as well.
Thanks, Luke. Any final thoughts from you, Zarina, on that?
Yeah, I think it is. I think this is actually one of the hardest challenges for HR in terms of, you know, not just with financial well-being, with all kind of benefits and with generally understanding workforce and how they're feeling and doing. I would say, I think it is really about, with everything Luke said, I think when you do work with a benefit provider, is working collaboratively with them to make sure that you're really clear on what it is that you know, the kind of the information you want to get out of it, and knowing that they can deliver on that. So I think working collaboratively with any kind of benefits providers, but also, again, communicating directly to your workforce as well. So having those ongoing conversations. So it's the kind of quantitative data and all of that kind of stuff, and then the kind of qualitative stuff and speaking kind of ongoing conversations, I think, are really important. But I do think it is I think the kind of, as Luke was saying, there's not kind of one answer for this, because it feeds into so many different other areas of our health, you know, as we were saying with financial well-being and physical well-being, that the whole thing comes in. But I think it's quite clear that if people have, you know, good well-being, they're going to perform better at work, they're going to feel better about themselves, they're going to have better relationships with their colleagues, all of this kind of stuff. I think that's just, we know this now. So
yeah, okay, that's great. So I think we just need to keep talking to remove the stigma around financial well-being in every conversation, and similarly still keep the stigma around mental health and well-being, try and remove that too. So it's been a really informative and revealing session, guys, so thanks to Luke and to Zarina.